When the listener senses your nerves and lends you their support out of sympathy and compassion, is that the performance of a true master? You can say this of acting or music or any other performing art, not just rakugo. Applause comes in response to the art. When applause precedes your art, it is a sign of weakness. Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. And I want to meditate a little bit on the words of Issho Arakawa that I just read to you. The story of Issho Arakawa is told to us in Akane-banashi, a manga currently being serialized in Shonen Jump. The story focuses on Akane Osaki, a young girl whose father is a rakugo-ka, a person who performs the art of rakugo. Now, as a performance art, rakugo doesn't really have an equivalent in the West. It is a kind of sketch comedy where one actor performs all parts, sitting alone on stage. It is both a masterclass in the performing art, the use of expression and tone of voice and pacing and intonation to convey to the audience a sense of place and person, but also a form of comedy. Like many great arts in Japan, it is very old, it is very traditional, and there are not that many people currently interested in it. But Akane is inspired by her father. She loves his performances, she loves his skills, and she loves the stories that make up the canon of rakugo. Now, when I say that rakugo is a very formal art, I don't just mean that it has a set canon of stories and a set formula to follow as you tell these stories. It is also very formalized in how you enter into the art. Sure, you can be an amateur rakugo storyteller, but if you want to be a professional, you're really not going to get very much work unless you go through a very formalized process to be recognized as a rakugo master, a shin-uchi. Now, Akane's father, Shinta, is about to take his examination to become a shin-uchi. He will be performing rakugo in front of a large crowd and be evaluated by the master of the school he is studying at, one Issho Arakawa. We see Shinta's performance, we see the audience erupt with applause, we think he's got it in the bag. And then Arakawa expels not just Shinta, but every other performer who took the exam with him that day. He removes them from the school entirely, and Arakawa is a very influential man in the world of rakugo. It is unlikely that another master of rakugo will take in any of these students that Arakawa has expelled. Again, this is a very strict and formal line of work. So Shinta retires. He gets himself a normal job, and he goes on his way. But Akane never forgets. She studies the ways of rakugo under her father's old tutor, Shiguma Arakawa, and eventually she takes steps to enter the world of professional rakugo herself. After a lot of work, after a lot of practice, and after a number of formative experiences, we see Akane come around to an amateur competition which she wins. That's not terribly surprising because she had the advantage of being tutored by a professional. In fact, you might even say it's a little bit unfair, and I would agree with that assessment. However, the winner of this particular tournament gets the opportunity to have a one-on-one discussion with Issho Arakawa, and this is what Akane is really after. We see her confront Arakawa and demand to know why her father was expelled, not just not promoted, but expelled from the world of rakugo. Arakawa has never explained why he made this decision. He didn't think it was anyone's business but his own, but since Akane is the daughter of one of the men he expelled, he agrees to explain himself. First he asks, "Why do you think your father deserved to be promoted to shin-uchi?" Akane answers that he gave a flawless performance, and we see the testimony to that in the applause that the audience gave him. But was the performance flawless? Arakawa asks. Well, Akane admits he may have been a little stiff during the opening patter. It may not have been an entirely perfect performance, but it was quite good, and the audience responded to that. They could sense his nervousness, and they knew this performance would make or break his career. And that was the problem. That is what leads Arakawa to respond with the words I read at the opening of this video. The brutal truth of the matter is, if your audience only responds to you because they know how desperate you are, you have failed as a performer. If you cannot sweep them away, if you cannot bring them into that other world you are trying to create in your performance, or if you are a writer in your story, if you are an artist with your drawing, if you cannot bring them into that world strictly through the power of your art, if they respond only because they sense something about you, your desperation, or even just a shared experience, if they respond because they are your friends or your family, this is not a testimony to your excellence as an artist. It is a testimony to your failure. My friends, this is a brutally difficult lesson to come to grips with. But he is not wrong. Throughout Akane's journey, we see signs of how Rakugo is struggling. It is an art form virtually unknown outside of Japan, and within Japan's borders, it is not that appreciated. Arakawa himself later draws Akane's attention to this, and I find it very poignant that in the panel where he does so, where he says there is a wealth of entertainment options available to people in the modern era, the artist has just depicted a human hand holding a cell phone, an ubiquitous device with which most people can find just about any kind of entertainment they could want. In that kind of an entertainment landscape, it seems almost unthinkable that people would try and cling to this very old, very stultified, very formal and traditional form of entertainment. And yet, they do. Akane clings to it because it binds her to her father. It is a shared love and art form that they have both treasured throughout their entire lives. The story offers us an interesting contrast to this. In the very competition that Akane takes part in before she can meet Issho Arakawa, we see two other performers, amateurs, who are considered favorites to win the competition. One believes that Rakugo needs to be updated, and he takes the traditional stories and he puts a modern spin on them. He's very proud of his ability to take these traditional tales and turn them into something that uses a lot of modern verbiage, that replaces archaic places and times and things with modern objects and landscapes that are familiar to the people hearing the stories. The other is a more traditional performer, a young woman who has appeared on television and approaches the stories with a sense of the heartwarming and wholesome nature of the tales. She doesn't use the cadences of a traditional rakugoka. Instead, she behaves as if she is on stage in a theater. She tries to wring out as much emotion as she can so that the audience will be swept up in that, because it is strictly the emotional response that she values. Arakawa gives some very simple, polite feedback to both of these performers, but it is obvious that he is not taking them seriously. Akane is the only one who receives his heartfelt feedback. They know it, the audience knows it, Akane knows it, we know it. Throughout this entire story, we see Issho Arakawa behave as a gatekeeper. He does not take these attempts to transform his art form seriously, because he knows these do not come from a place of real dedication to Rakugo. Akane's rival performers are just looking for an opportunity to elevate their own position by winning a little cultural clout by participating in a Rakugo competition. Yes, they understand some of the things that give the art form its charm, but they haven't taken the time to understand it from the ground up. An appeal to emotions is fine. Rakugo is a comedy art form, after all. But if you are banking on the audience's emotional reaction, you will always be at their mercy, and your own skill will be secondary. Tweaks and updates to a story are fine, but updating the parts of a story does not necessarily show that you understand the story and that you are telling it correctly. Arakawa rightly rebuffs these intrusions on his art form, just as he rebuffed the weakness he saw in Shinta's performance during his Shin-uchi exam. Rakugo is drowning as an art form. It is lost in a sea of entertainment, and only the best and the most excellent performers who have understood the art form from the ground up can keep its head above water in the shifting tides of modern entertainment. If Rakugo is to endure, it must be as strong as possible, and that is what Arakawa will demand of anyone who wants to call themselves a Rakugo-ka. There is a lesson here for everyone who loves a form of art. You must demand the best of it if you wish it to endure in the modern world. The cell phone, the streaming service, the live stream, all of these technological innovations have brought dozens of different kinds of entertainment to people's fingertips, and in and of itself, there is nothing wrong with that. But now there is so much entertainment, it is very easy to grow complacent and simply take one or two forms of entertainment that are constantly available and gorge yourself on them. And when you are someone like a Rakugo-ka, when you perform very short, poignant stories to provide just a few minutes of entertainment at a time, only the very best can break through that barrier of sludge and make their greatness known. Issho Arakawa devoted his entire life to Rakugo, not because he wanted fame, not because it paid him well, but because he thought it was important and because he loved it, and he would demand nothing but the best from it. Although his attitude was hard, the results are worthwhile. When Akane finally hears Arakawa's reasoning for expelling her father, you would expect her to be crushed, to be disheartened, to at least be a little bit upset. But no, what happens is she smiles and she says, "I am glad to hear that you had a reason and it was not an arbitrary decision. But you were wrong. My father's Rakugo is worthwhile, and I will prove it to you." Issho Arakawa expelled a number of students whose performances were not quite there yet. You see, they had a great deal of skill, and the audience was on their side, and it would be very simple for them to fall into complacency if he gave them any kind of feedback at all. No matter what he said, they were likely to think, well, yes, Master Arakawa thought that, but the audience was on my side. So Arakawa threw them out into the wilderness, and he waited. He waited for them to retrain themselves, to transform their art, to find those minuscule weaknesses and hammer them out and come back to challenge him. It took 6 years, but that gamble finally paid off. And when Akane leaves after their confrontation, we see just for a moment a look of satisfaction on Issho Arakawa's face. Today, there are a lot of people who want to take great things and update them or tweak the language a little bit or just make them conform more to what they want, rather than what the art form has always been. There are plenty of people who think you should just sympathize with them and their difficult position in life, rather than expect the best possible art that they can give. You see it in television, you see it in movies, you see it in literature, you see it in music and on the stage and in painting and in drawing and in comics and in countless mediums. It has always been an issue, and there have always been people like Issho Arakawa rebuffing the iconoclasts and saying, no, we have invested all of this time and all of this energy in these art forms, and we will preserve them because that is worthwhile. And whether the art you are looking to preserve is as simple as a handful of novels written by an English linguist 70, 80, 90 years ago, or whether it is the entirety of literature in the Western canon, or if it is the art of painting or the art of illustrating comics, these things are worth defending in the way that Issho Arakawa defended Rakugo. If you hold the line, if you are patient, and if you keep your peace in the face of critics who do not understand what you are trying to accomplish, sooner or later, that will pay off. And that, my friends, is worthwhile. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit, and I will talk to you later.